Most men misunderstand what physical touch actually means to a mature woman. They assume attraction is built through confidence, boldness, or physical escalation. But emotionally experienced women often respond to something far more subtle. Because after enough life experience, relationships, disappointments, and emotional lessons, a woman no longer separates touch from emotional intention. She feels the psychology behind it. That's why two identical touches can create completely different emotional reactions. One can feel intrusive, the other can feel unforgettable. And the difference is rarely physical. It's emotional safety. Welcome back to the Female Mind Lab. A mature woman has usually learned how to protect her emotional space carefully. Not because she is cold, but because experience teaches people that not everyone who touches you understands you emotionally. And this is why emotionally intelligent touch becomes so powerful. Imagine a woman walking into a crowded room with someone she trusts. There's noise everywhere, movement, pressure, social tension. Then, without forcing attention toward himself, the man places his hand softly against the middle of her back while guiding her through the crowd. It lasts maybe 2 seconds, but emotionally, it says far more than words. It says, "I'm aware of you. I'm present. You're safe with me." That kind of touch affects the nervous system differently, because psychologically, human touch is not only processed physically, it's processed emotionally and neurologically. Certain touches reduce emotional tension. Certain touches create calmness. Certain touches silently communicate protection, reassurance, and emotional steadiness. And mature women notice these emotional signals immediately, especially because many women become emotionally exhausted by interactions that feel performative or physically motivated too quickly. But when touch feels calm instead of rushed, emotionally aware instead of emotionally hungry, attraction begins building naturally. Not forced attraction, emotional attraction. There's also something deeply intimate about a man who understands restraint. A man who doesn't constantly reach for touch to prove desire, but instead uses touch with emotional awareness and timing. Because emotionally intelligent touch creates trust before it creates passion. For example, lightly holding her hand while she's nervous, resting your hand gently on her shoulder when she's emotionally overwhelmed, pulling her slightly closer during a stressful moment instead of during a performative romantic scene. These moments stay in a woman's memory because they connect touch to emotional relief. And emotionally, relief creates attachment faster than excitement sometimes does. That's the hidden psychology many people miss. A mature woman is not only asking herself how a man touches her, she's unconsciously asking herself, how do I feel emotionally when he's close to me? And when the answer becomes calm, safe, understood, emotionally protected, her heart slowly begins opening in ways even she cannot fully explain. And once emotional safety begins forming, touch starts carrying a completely different meaning. It no longer feels physical alone. It becomes emotional communication without words. This is where many men completely misunderstand mature women. They think attraction grows through intensity, constant flirting, or physical boldness. But emotionally intelligent women are often drawn towards something quieter. Attention. Real attention. Because a mature woman can immediately feel the difference between a touch that is trying to impress her and a touch that is responding to her emotionally in the present moment. And that difference changes how deeply she connects. Imagine a woman talking about something stressful from her day. Maybe she's trying to stay composed while explaining a problem she normally keeps hidden. Most people interrupt. Some try to fix everything immediately. Others barely listen at all. But a man who gently places his hand over hers while simply listening creates a completely different emotional experience. Because now the touch is not demanding energy from her, it's supporting her emotionally. And psychologically, supportive touch creates intimacy incredibly fast. Not artificial intimacy, nervous system intimacy. The kind that makes someone feel emotionally calmer around you without fully understanding why. This is also why small touches often affect mature women more deeply than dramatic romantic gestures. A man softly moving a strand of hair away from her face while maintaining eye contact. Lightly squeezing her hand before she walks into a difficult situation. Resting his hand near hers during silence instead of constantly talking. These moments communicate emotional awareness. And emotional awareness feels incredibly attractive because it makes a woman feel emotionally accompanied instead of emotionally handled. That distinction matters deeply. Many women spend years around people who react only to what they can physically see. But emotionally intelligent touch responds to invisible emotional states. Stress, nervousness, sadness, exhaustion. And when a man notices those emotions without needing them explained directly, trust begins forming beneath the surface. This is why timing matters more than technique. A touch during emotional vulnerability becomes psychologically powerful because the brain starts associating that person with emotional comfort. For example, a long hug after a difficult day can affect a woman more deeply than expensive gifts ever could. Because emotionally, she remembers how her body relaxed around him, how her breathing slowed, how she stopped feeling emotionally alone for a moment. And that feeling becomes addictive in the healthiest way. Because mature women are not simply searching for attraction anymore. Many are searching for emotional peace. For someone whose presence feels grounding instead of emotionally chaotic. And when touch quietly communicates, "You don't have to carry everything alone around me." A woman often begins opening her heart long before she consciously realizes she's falling in love. The deeper emotional connection becomes, the more certain touches begin attaching themselves to memory. Not because they were intense, but because they arrived during moments when a woman emotionally needed them most. And this is something mature women rarely forget, because human beings do not emotionally bond only through pleasure. They bond through emotional experiences that change how safe, calm, or emotionally supported they feel during vulnerable moments. That's why some of the most unforgettable touches are almost invisible to everyone else. A hand held slightly tighter during anxiety. A quiet hug after emotional exhaustion. Fingers brushing against hers while she's silently overwhelmed. These moments may seem small externally, but psychologically, they create emotional imprinting. Imagine a woman sitting in silence after a difficult day. She's mentally exhausted, but trying not to show it fully. She keeps saying, "I'm okay," even though emotionally she feels drained. Many people hear the words, but emotionally attentive people notice the energy behind them. And then, instead of forcing conversation or trying to impress her emotionally, a man simply pulls her gently into his chest and lets her breathe there for a moment. No performance, no unnecessary words, just calm presence. That kind of touch can affect a mature woman deeply because it regulates emotional tension instead of increasing it. And psychologically, emotional regulation creates powerful attachment. This is why mature women often become emotionally connected to men whose touch feels calming rather than emotionally demanding. Because many women secretly carry emotional fatigue from constantly managing stress, responsibilities, expectations, and emotional pressure. They spend so much time staying emotionally composed that moments of genuine softness begin feeling incredibly intimate. and touch becomes powerful when it gives her temporary relief from emotional self-protection. A mature woman may not always verbalize this openly, but she remembers the people who made her nervous system feel safe. She remembers the hug that slowed her thoughts down, the hand that stayed steady when she was emotionally overwhelmed, the forehead kiss that felt reassuring instead of performative. And over time, these touches stop feeling physical alone. They begin symbolizing emotional security. This is also why emotionally synchronized touch matters so much. When touch matches the emotional moment instead of interrupting it, it creates harmony between two people emotionally. For example, touching her gently while she's vulnerable feels intimate. Touching her aggressively while she's emotionally distant feels disconnecting. Mature women notice this difference instinctively, because emotional maturity sharpens emotional sensitivity. And eventually, attraction evolves into something deeper than chemistry. A woman begins associating a man's presence with emotional rest, with peace, with comfort, with feeling emotionally held without needing to constantly explain herself. And when touch creates that feeling consistently, love often begins growing quietly beneath the surface, long before either person fully says it out loud. As emotional attachment deepens, touch begins revealing something even more important than attraction: intention. Because mature women pay very close attention to the emotional energy behind physical closeness. Experience teaches them that not every touch comes from care. Some touches are impatient, some are controlling. Some are emotionally empty even when they appear affectionate on the surface. And over time, women become extremely sensitive to this difference. That's why protective and reassuring touches often create such intense emotional reactions, not because they are dramatic, but because they quietly communicate emotional steadiness. Imagine a woman walking through a crowded street at night. Without making a performance out of it, the man gently places his hand near her waist and guides her away from people brushing aggressively past her. It's subtle, calm, natural. But emotionally, she feels considered, protected, important. And psychologically, that feeling reaches something very deep inside many women, because emotional safety is one of the strongest foundations of romantic attachment. This is also why mature women are often drawn toward touches that feel grounding instead of possessive. There's a huge emotional difference between control and reassurance. Control creates tension. Reassurance creates trust. For example, lightly pulling her closer during an uncomfortable social moment feels emotionally protective. Grabbing her constantly to claim ownership feels emotionally draining. And mature women feel this distinction almost instantly, because emotionally intelligent touch gives comfort without removing freedom. That balance matters deeply. Many women spend years around emotionally inconsistent people, people whose affection changes with mood, ego, attention, or emotional immaturity. So when a woman experiences someone whose touch feels emotionally stable, it affects her nervous system differently. She begins relaxing around him naturally, not because she's trying to impress him, but because her body no longer feels emotionally alert or guarded. And that emotional relaxation becomes addictive in relationships. This is where small gestures become incredibly powerful. A hand resting gently on her arm during an honest conversation. A soft touch against her shoulder when she feels socially anxious. Holding eye contact while touching her hand slowly instead of rushing physical intimacy. These moments communicate emotional presence, and presence is rare, especially in modern relationships where many people touch physically without emotionally arriving fully into the moment. But mature women notice when someone is emotionally present with them completely. They feel it. And over time, these reassuring touches create something far deeper than attraction alone. They create
emotional trust. The kind of trust where a woman slowly stops preparing herself for emotional disappointment.
Where she stops overanalyzing every interaction. Where closeness starts feeling peaceful instead of emotionally risky. And often, that is the exact moment love quietly begins replacing emotional caution inside her heart. And in the end, the touches that make a mature woman fall deeply in love are rarely the ones people expect. They are not always passionate, not always dramatic, not always sexual. Very often, they are quiet moments that feel emotionally honest. Because mature women are not only touched by physical closeness anymore, they are touched by emotional presence, by consistency, by the feeling that someone is emotionally connected to them in the moment instead of simply reacting to desire. And strangely, the smallest touches often become the most unforgettable. A forehead kiss before she leaves for work. A hand gently resting on her knee while she talks about something difficult. Fingers slowly brushing against hers during silence. A long hug after an emotionally exhausting day where neither person says much at all. These moments create deep emotional attachment because they make a woman feel emotionally synchronized with someone. Not rushed, not pressured, not emotionally alone. And psychologically, emotional synchronization is one of the strongest predictors of long-term romantic bonding. Because love grows strongest in spaces where a person feels emotionally safe enough to fully soften. Imagine a mature woman lying next to someone after a difficult week. She's mentally tired, emotionally drained, quiet, not looking for excitement or performance. Then he simply pulls her closer slowly, kisses her forehead, and holds her without trying to force conversation or physical escalation. That moment can affect her more deeply than grand romantic gestures ever could, because emotionally, she feels understood without needing to explain herself. And mature women crave that kind of emotional understanding far more than most people realize. This is why emotionally unforced touch feels so powerful. It doesn't interrupt connection, it deepens it. There's no desperation inside it, no need to prove masculinity, no pressure to create a cinematic moment, just emotional awareness. And women trust that energy deeply because it feels emotionally real. Over time, these small touches begin building emotional memory inside a relationship. A woman starts associating one person with calmness, safety, emotional warmth, relief from the outside world. And eventually, she no longer falls only for the man himself. She falls for how peaceful she feels in his presence. That is the hidden psychology behind deep emotional love. Because mature women often do not give their hearts away simply because someone excites them. They give their hearts to the person whose presence feels emotionally safe enough to rest inside. I hope this video helped you understand relationships and human emotions from a deeper perspective. If you enjoy this kind of psychological content, stay connected with the Female Mind Lab, and I'll see you in the next video.